This episode is brought to you by Early Innings, an anthology of the first 4 years of the Twin Bill. Featuring over 200 pages of baseball poetry, short stories, essays, interviews, comics, and art, it tells the story of what it means to love baseball today. The Athletic's Tyler Kepner said, like a box of ballpark Cracker Jack, there's a delightful surprise on every page of the Twin Bill's Early Innings. This is a collection to be savored, a loving and lyrical celebration of the art of baseball. Early Innings is available now from 406 Press. This episode is also brought to you by Ben Shahan's Short Relief. It asks the question of what happens when men are not ready to give up that boys' game, the national pastime. In 9 stories, he traces the stories of a minor league pitcher holding on to his last shred of hope for promotion to the show, little leaguers' formative experiences, and a host of men and boys in between. Short Relief is out on 406 Press and available at 406press.com. Welcome to the Twin Bill Podcast. I'm your host, Scott Bolohan. The 1987 Cardinals are a bit of a forgotten team. Coming off a brutal loss in the 1985 World Series and a rough 1986, no one thought they would end up back in the Fall Classic. One of the major reasons for it was the brilliance of Whitey Herzog. In Doug Feldmann's book, One More for the White Rat, he makes a good case for it being Herzog's best managerial season. Doug is also an official scorer, and we talked about that too. Enjoy. Welcome to the podcast, Doug. How you doing today?
Very good, Scott. Thank you.
So I usually jump right into the book with my guests, but I am fascinated by your background. You are actually one of the official scorers for the Cincinnati Reds. That's correct, right?
I am. Yes.
So I guess the question is, how do you get this job? This is, one of these mythical jobs that are out there in the baseball world, and you have it.
Well, thank you. A long, winding baseball road, for sure. I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago, but my father was from Southern Illinois, which is all Cardinals territory. He played for the Cubs and the White Sox in the minor leagues. So being from the northwest suburbs, we were Cubs fans. But family trips to St. Louis kind of metamorphosized me into a Cardinals guy, I guess you could say, about high school time. Played in college, and then one of my college coaches at Northern Illinois University helped me get into scouting. Was a part-time scout and a college high school coach for some time, 15 years after college. In 2011, I started working for MLB.com as a data caster. And that's actually the person who sits right next to the official score in all the ballparks. And really, one might argue, has even the more important job than the official scorer these days. And I still do that job as well. That person controls the electronic version of the official score sheet, so to speak. And not only that, I'm sure you followed a game, your listeners have followed a game on their phones. It says, so-and-so doubles to right field. That's myself, or the stringer, as it were, on a laptop sitting next to the official score, putting in each pitch, putting in each play. But the computer's doing all the work and tabulating the box score and the plays. So at the end of the official score sits next to that person and has his or her same old-fashioned paper score sheet, which strangely enough isn't worth that much these days. In the old days, the paper was it, and the official score was it. That person had one chance to look at a play, hit or an error, call it, you write it down, and that paper was the record. And maybe as of 20 years ago, that paper was faxed into MLB as the official record. But now what happens is at the end of the night, the MLB.com stringer and the official score compare what they have, make sure everything matches. And then the stringer is given the go-ahead to send that out as final. And again, the score sheet that the official score, he can take that home. He can put it in his bathroom. He can throw it away. I mean, it technically is property of MLB, but that paper, strangely enough, maybe sadly enough, doesn't matter as much as it once did. I'm in my rookie year as an official scorer I don't work for the Reds. I work for MLB in Cincinnati, properly said, but along with other scorer and enjoy the challenges very much. It's the old saying, you go to the ballpark, you see something new every night, and that's for sure. And I'm learning something new every night. You think you know baseball, and then you really start digging into that rule book, especially section 9, which is the scoring section. You learn something new every day. Yeah.
I'm sure. I'm sure. So let's say, there's a hard hit ball at the third baseman and it, hits off his glove. Are you going by gut reaction? Are you watching replays? Are you looking at StatCast numbers? Like, oh, this was a 99-mile-an-hour ball off the bat. And what goes into making these decisions?
You're 4 for 4, everything you just said. First is gut. A longtime official scorer in Tampa, Bill Matthews, gave me some of the simplest, best advice. He said, trust your eyes. He said, your eyes don't lie, but your brain can make you think of lies or something like that if you rethink things too much. What I go with, first of all, is something surprised me. Oh, you should have made that play, or wow, what a play he made. That's where I start. And then, yes, in this day and age, we have replay, we have StatCast, we have how hard the ball was hit. We're also on support with another scorer during the game on Slack. I can message him and say, hey, did you see that play? What did you think there? So, big support network out there of not just people, but information and replay. And all it's in the effort to get it right. As I mentioned earlier, in the old days, it was just you see a play and you did your best with it, and that was it. Now, because we're expected to have more accuracy, so to speak, players also now have the right to appeal official score rulings. I have 24 hours to change my mind. If I go home or even wake up the next morning, I can submit a change on a play I've been ruminating. And a player has 72 hours after the game to file an appeal if he doesn't agree. And with that appeal, it goes to New York. We just call it New York in general, the body out there. If New York feels that it's worthy of an appeal, they send it to an appeals committee, which is 3 former MLB players who vote 2-1 or 3-0 to uphold the official scorer's ruling or to go with the player. It gets overturned. And that's the best all of us can do. The players have their right to appeal. I do the best I can with like really in the order of what you said too, Scott. My gut, replay, StatCast. I mean, all those things, my opinions from other scorers as I put it out there on Slack. So it's really impressive how it has come to be where there is so much validation in getting it right. And I think that's a good thing. And it's not second guessing. It's just, we're all just trying to get, like umpires, in replay with umpires, we all just want to get the call right. And so yeah. But the rule of thumb that really answer your question, back to your question, our first rule of thumb beyond trusting your eyes is, should the average major league player at that position have made that play with ordinary effort? Ordinary effort is the key phrase. If it goes beyond ordinary effort, you lean towards hit. An average major league player, take Ellie De La Cruz at shortstop for the Reds. Now he may get to a ball, say a pop up behind the third baseman down the left field line. He may get to a ball that other shortstops can't get to, but he gets there and he bobbles it. Well, you got to take into account, how many shortstops would have even gotten there in the first place? Right. So right. Average player with ordinary effort should have made that play. And that's really our basic rule of thumb.
Well, this has been fascinating. This has been the highlight of me hosting the podcast for these years so far. I've loved this. This has been great.
It's exciting. Maybe not as exciting as I make it sound, but no, it's fun.
Last question on this. How often do you get challenges from players? Is this a common thing?
Not terribly often. Some players throw a lot of spaghetti against the wall to see what sticks. And there is some protection against that. I mean, the league notices that players file frivolous appeals time after time, but they're almost always sincere, and they have that right to do. Let me just say this: with the 80 or 90 official scores there are across MLB, I think to date we've had in excess of 400 appeals. You can do the math on that. That comes out to about 4 or 5 per score by this time of year. That's about right.
Yeah, that's not bad. That's not bad at all.
So it's and interestingly, that number stays about the same every year. I mean, it never seems to go way up or way down. The number of appeals, it's pretty flat.
How do you end up writing books? You went through your history here, playing, scouting. I know you're a professor. Where do books fit in? How do you even have time to do this?
Well, I think I mentioned to you off the air, I jumped into the parenting game late. I'm 55 years old and have an 11-year-old, and certainly things were maybe more productive in the older days. But no, it's something that I tried not long out of college, a first book. And like anything else, the first time's the hardest, but then you learn, you get better at it. Both my parents were educators. Before I started school, my mom took me to the local library. That's how we passed the time in the Stone Ages without the internet. Picked up a kid's book about Dizzy Dean, the old Cardinals pitcher from the 1930s, and just fell in love with him. And that became my first book, the story of the 1934 St. Louis Cardinals. So just carved it out into a little hobby, and was grateful that I was able to grow, I think, as a writer over the years, and also keep, I think the important thing is find topics I'm passionate about. I can't quit my day job as a nonfiction writer, but I don't write to support myself. I write to, I would say, leave an artifact or artifacts behind on things that were important to me. Like Keith Magnuson and the Blackhawks, just not just a hero of mine when I was a little kid growing up outside Chicago, but a man who, of course, life was tragically cut short, but was a giant off the ice as well in Chicago. Great philanthropist, successful businessman, great family man. Well, it's Scott. It's important for me to, if I can, leave something behind that says, "Hey, this is important to me, and this was important to me, and hopefully important to somebody else."
That's great. So this book is about the 87 Cardinals. Where does this idea come for you originally?
Yeah, I did a book on the '85 Cardinals team that was unexpectedly won 101 games, was picked for last place at the start of the year, but then lost to Kansas City in the World Series, and then won as Whitey Herzog is building the team from 1980 to 1982. I call it 79 to 82, but Herzog takes over in 80. So it kind of fulfills the canon, so to speak, of the 80s Cardinals. 87 was the last pennant winner for Herzog. And it's funny, Ricky Horton, a former Cardinals pitcher and current Cardinals broadcaster, I've talked with him many times over the years, great guy. And he says that, in the minds of Cardinal fans, 87 is kind of the forgotten team from that decade. They, like the '85 team, they lost in Game 7 of the World Series, but forgotten in the sense that it might have been Herzog's best managerial job, and that's saying a lot because the injuries that befell that team, the question marks that were with that team going into the season, were kind of unparalleled, at least in Herzog's experience. I can get into that more later if you like, but really,
So I was gonna say, like, coming off. I mean, obviously the World Series in '85, the call and they kind of check out in Game 7, more or less. It sounds like. I mean, that seems
yes.
to be kind of the story you hear. And then I have an awful 86. 87 starts off. What are the expectations coming into the year here?
Well, it was such a drop off, as you alluded, in '86 that Herzog said, "You better come to spring training ready to work and get us back, back in shape." And they had given up on Darrell Porter, who was, he never put up big numbers, but Herzog saw him as a leader at catcher for the 82, 80, 85 teams. They let him go, and Herzog in the offseason is looking for a big bat besides first baseman Jack Clark to drive in runs. I mean, he's still focused on the running game, running and pitching and defense, but he said he needs a bat that can drive a guy in from first, besides Jack Clark. And he wants Lance Parrish, the old Tigers catcher, and is about to sign him. But the team doctor for the Cardinals advised Herzog that Parrish had a bad back and he wasn't worth the risk. The Phillies wind up signing Parrish, and just at the end of spring training, he instead gets Tony Pena, who is the preeminent defensive catcher of the day, a decent hitter, decent RBI man, maybe not quite the slugger that Herzog was looking for, but Herzog loved defensive catchers, Porter, and I mean, just anyone who would control the game from behind the plates. But Herzog still said going into '87 spring training, the team had as many question marks as he had ever experienced in his managerial career. Willie McGee had a bad knee and had a down year, as many of them did in '86. Could he return to his MVP form of '85? Even though Vince Coleman had stolen 100 bases in each of his first 2 years in the majors, was still striking out a lot, was throwing to the wrong base from left field. Herzog said they still didn't know long term what type of player Coleman would be. Tommy Herr had bad knees. They were looking to put a rookie, Jim Lindemann, in right field. Again, a new face behind the plate who, even though Pena is an accomplished catcher, had to gain the trust of a pitching staff. So many questions, and those questions seemed to be answered early in the year but then injuries hit them
Yeah.
again.
Just a comical run of injuries to start the year off with. I mean,
Really
it's
was. Pena himself breaks his thumb a week or two into the season. And a guy named Steve Lake, who, if some of your followers around Chicago may remember Steve Lake as Jody Davis's backup on the Cubs of part of the 80s. Herzog had signed him. Steve Lake steps in and does a great job for 4 or 5 weeks in Pena's absence. Jose Oquendo, the ultimate utility man, steps in for Tommy Herr when Herr gets injured. Ozzie Smith is a constant at short. Terry Pendleton's a constant at third. But the pitching staff, on Good Friday night in April, Tommy Herr hits a grand slam in extra innings to beat the Mets. It's called the seat cushion game in St. Louis. So everybody threw their seat cushions on the field when it happened. They're giving away seat cushions that night. 2 days later, on Easter Sunday, they're finishing that series with the Mets. John Tudor is not pitching that day. He's innocently in the dugout. And a Mets backup catcher, Barry Lyons, goes after a pop-up, can't stop himself. In the days before there were rails in front of the dugouts, at least at Busch Stadium, slides into the dugout, blows out John Tudor's knee. He's lost for 3 or 4 months. But in that vein, uh, two young left-handers, Joe McGrain and Greg Matthews, step in and do their jobs. You have to credit the players, of course, but again, it's a mouthful to say that it's Whitey Herzog's best managerial job. That's saying a lot, but I really think it was. Coming off that bad year and plugging those pieces in as he went along in '87.
well, you look at the team. And I think there's one guy who hits over 12 home runs. I mean, it's Jack Clark. I mean, that's it. I mean, there's not a lot there. I mean, and yes, I know this is Whitey ball. You look at the pitching staff. There's some good pitchers there. There's nothing. There's no ace. There's no Doc Gooden on the team.
Nobody won more than 11 games, I think, but like 5 or 6 guys had double-digit wins. Yeah.
And so do you really think that you credit a lot of this to Whitey? Do the players feel that way as well?
I think so. There are a couple, I won't name names, a couple players in the '80s Cardinals thought Whitey was overrated as a manager. I wasn't there. I wasn't on the roster. I don't know, but I'll say this: Tommy Herr said time and time again he would get down to first base on a walk or a single, and he said the first baseman's there, chatting away, holding them on. He said time and time again he'd hear the other team's first baseman bad mouthing their manager, second guessing him. And he said he never heard that with the Cardinals. He never heard anybody second guess Herzog, maybe under their breath or in the hotel room or whatever. But he said, with the Cardinals, with Herzog, Tommy Herr said that he always thought they had an advantage over the other team's manager and that they wouldn't get outmanaged come a close game, the 7th, 8th, and 9th inning. They weren't going to get outmanaged if they had Whitey Herzog on their bench. I think there was great faith in what he did by the roster. And in that regard, an interesting thing Herzog did every year at the end of spring training. You got the 25 guys who are going to make the club and come north from Florida. That last or second to last day, whatever, of spring workouts, he would go around the locker room to those 25 guys and say, okay, John Morris, you may get 150 at bats this year. You might get 20 starts in the outfield, but I need you as a left-handed pinch hitter off the bench, late innings. Are you okay with that? And John Morris, not wanting to go back to Louisville, will say, yeah, I'm okay with that. Jose Oquendo, you go over to Jose Oquendo. Jose, you might get 200 at bats. You might play 5 or 6 different positions, get 30, 40 starts. Are you okay with that? Yeah. So Herzog had a definite role for all, and I mean all 25 men. And he said, interesting thing, he told me this on the phone once. He said, and it always stuck with me, you do a bench player a disservice by giving him the idea that he might one day be a starter. And that's an interesting take.
It is, yeah.
A player can always go to another team and find that for himself. But if you give a guy, I think, hey, by June, July, you might be a starting player, that kind of undercuts not only the whole plan of the team, but also, maybe relationships between the players. So John Morris, another interesting guy to talk to, said, Whitey knew what was going to happen in a game 3 or 4 innings in advance. And by May or June of a given season, Morris said he knew in which situations he would be used, when Whitey would want to use him, and he'd know to get ready. And I think that's a gift. And it's a gift that a lot of managers have, but not all. And Herzog had it to the hilt for sure.
Is there kind of a moment in the season where, like a turning point or a moment where they kind of realize like, oh, right, this is kind of a special team that we have here. Because I mean, coming into the year, this was supposed to be the Mets year again, and that was kind of like the general thought. And then all of a sudden,
Yeah.
here are the Cardinals. Is there a moment in that season that kind of changes that season for the team?
That's an interesting question and one I hadn't considered before, actually. I don't think so, except for it's funny, this happened 3 years in a row. Five, sometime mid to late April, the Cardinals swept or took 3 out of 4 from the Mets unexpectedly, because again, this is us team picked to finish last place. April of '86, the Mets year, they swept 4 straight in Busch Stadium from the Cardinals. And then '87, once again, the Cardinals, I think, took 5 out of 6 in April from the Mets. When, just as you say, the Mets were expected to be a dynasty. They added Kevin McReynolds from the San Diego Padres, just making the rich richer because they had been platooning in left field with like Danny Heap, George Foster, those types of players. To sign a guy like Kevin McReynolds from San Diego, that they look to be unbeatable. Life happens. Some players went into drug rehab. Roger McDowell, their ace reliever, got a hernia. He was out for 6 weeks. So, um, it's a lesson in life. Don't worry, because things can and will change. And I would say, yeah, that just that April in general, Scott, where they showed the Mets, hey, we're back. But it's interesting how those two teams had a real telltale April with each other for the 3 straight years. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Kind of sets the tone, honestly, and especially after the year before, like that's what that team needed, I think, and especially then dealing with all the injuries and stuff. So yeah, I completely agree with that.
But no, it's a great question you asked, because there really isn't a watershed moment in the middle of the season. There's an ebb and flow to the season. They had some decent winning streaks, some bad losing streaks, but they just kind of stayed in it. I'm going to state the obvious here, maybe, but with all Cardinal teams of the '80s, in the '80s, there's so much base stealing around baseball, but usually just one guy on each team you had to worry about. Expos had Tim Raines, and Pittsburgh had Omar Moreno, Ricky in Oakland, all that. But the Cardinals are 5, 6, maybe 7 guys in the lineup that you had to worry about, not just stealing a base, but going first to third, going first to home, and just put enormous pressure on the defense. And that continued into '87.
I'm going to jump all the way ahead to the World Series. So tough series with the Giants. Tony Pena's back. He's hitting. Things are going well. Some good pitching. They play the Twins. The Twins are pretty similar to this Cardinal team in the sense that they weren't really expected necessarily to be where they were at that point. What is the expectation coming into the World Series?
That's right. The Twins, I think, had the worst, if I'm not mistaken, the worst road record and the best home record in baseball. But they still only won about 84, 85, 86 games, somewhere in there. Upset the Tigers in the championship series. The Tigers were expected to win that. So, I think confidence was high until the Cardinals stepped into the Metrodome. Willie McGee had been there for an all-star game. I think Pena had been there for an all-star game too. And they told everybody else, hey, look, on pop-ups, you can't see the ball in that Teflon roof. You'll see it when it's coming down. You won't see it when it's going up. But beyond that, the noise. Jim Lindemann, the rookie right fielder, spoke with him, and he said, you could sit with somebody on the bench, like you and I could be sitting like this on the bench next to each other. We couldn't hear each other talking. It was that loud. And he said it was that loud, like an international soccer match. When the screaming happens at the kickoff. He said from pitch one, it was that loud, where you just couldn't hear anything. And so the Twins had, I mean to oversimplify this, but the Twins got 4 home games. The Cardinals got 3. The home team won every game. And if you see today, well, this is going back decades now, but the postseason tradition that's become in every ballpark now, fans waving white hankies. The Twins take credit for that. They call them the Homer Hankies because they're hitting so many home runs. And you look back, it's kind of hard to find that before the '87 World Series. They were the ones to start that. So in the end, you could say the Cardinals ran out of gas because one writer said it was the ran out of gas house gang. And they just,
Good.
I think they started Tom Pagnozzi, a rookie catcher, was their designated hitter in Game 7 of the World Series.
Yeah.
Steve Lake, I think Herzog wanted to get another right-handed bat in the lab. So Steve Lake, a backup catcher, he was watching the NFL that Sunday in the locker room, and Herzog comes in and tells him, hey, you're starting Game 7 of the World Series. So, but again, Whitey had his master plan all the way up until Game 7, the last day of the year. And It didn't work out, but I do think it was his best managerial job given what had happened the year before and all the things that transpired in '87.
But you kind of mentioned this team is, and I suppose that the World Series isn't as dramatic as in say '85 with with the call and all that kind of stuff. It becomes a little bit forgotten. How should we remember this '87 team?
Well, good question, Scott. I think just quintessential Cardinal baseball again, not just the stolen bases, but the you know solid, if not spectacular, pitching, spectacular, perhaps defense. Everyone doing their job. I go back to that thing Herzog said. Everyone doing their job, and you look at the individual numbers. It's that old saying where the total is more than the sum of the parts, or however the saying goes.
Yeah, yeah.
Individually, I think Jose Oquendo hit 280, had those 200 at bats. Steve Lake, maybe 220, 230, but big hits, timely hits. So it's more than it shows in the numbers themselves, and that's a vague statement. But I think a revalidation of Whitey Ball. You used the term Whitey Ball earlier, and in '82, the birth of Whitey Ball, you might say, they had beaten the best slugging team in the National League that year, the Atlanta Braves, in the playoffs, and then beat the greatest slugging team people had seen in a long time up until that point, the '82 Brewers, beat them in the World Series. So that was the initial validation of Whitey Ball. And then they went toe to toe with a great slugging team in the Giants, and then a great slugging team in the Twins, but fell short. I think to put it in one statement, just a validation that, and you know what I'm getting at. I'd love to see it back today, but it won't happen. A revalidation of that type of baseball, where it's hey, a triple can be exciting, a hit and run can be exciting. Everything doesn't have to be a home run, and exit velocity and trajectory.
Well, that was kind of my next question. And so you do kind of see like the Dodgers have the whole team. They can move guys around, and guys coming off the Tigers are playing platoons all over the place in matchups and stuff. And, everyone on the roster is getting time and stuff. But you don't, obviously it's a power game now. It's a power and strikeout game. You were a former scout. If a team was built around speed, athleticism, do you think they'd have a chance today?
Well, I think they'd have more than a chance if it actually came to fruition. Keith Hernandez said, this is him talking. I would love to see a team like the Cardinals today. They would give teams fits. Pitchers wouldn't know how to hold all those runners on. The problem is the mental, I'll say the mental and cultural aspect of baseball now, in that, starting pitchers, for instance, are programmed to think, well, I only have to go 5 innings. I only have to throw X number of pitches. Try taking the ball from Bob Gibson or even John Tudor, off the mound. It's a different mindset of the game today. And in the face of home run distance and exit velocity and all that, it would take great bravery for an owner and a general manager and their team, their team of front office people, to say, hey, we're going to start from scratch and build everything around speed, pitching, and defense. It would take great courage. I'd love to see it. As you mentioned, that you see bits and pieces of it.
Yeah.
And certainly not to discount data, because data plays a role. But I'm working on a new book with Roger McDowell, Mets reliever. And I finished the '87 Cardinals book with a great statement Roger said he has, in light of the numbers and all that. He says, he said baseball has always had a heartbeat. And you don't know what that heartbeat is like until you're on the mound and Vince Coleman is on first base and you're holding him on. Then you know what the heartbeat of baseball is all about. Stuff you can't put in the computer. And that stuff will always be there, and I don't want us to lose that stuff. Data plays a role, but as the saying goes, it doesn't tell the whole story. So I'll leave it at that.
Well, Doug, this was fascinating. The book is great. Thank you so much for the time. I had a great time talking to you.
Well, likewise, Scott. Thank you for having me.
That was Doug Feldmann. His book, One More for the White Rat, the 1987 St. Louis Cardinals Chase the Pennant, is out now. We talk to people in and around baseball literature every week on the podcast and publish around 50 writers every year in the Twinbill Literary Journal. Until next time,